The school auditorium was louder than usual that afternoon. Chairs scraped against the floor, students laughed in small groups, and teachers tried their best to keep everything organized. It was the day of the annual talent showcase, and everyone was excited. Some students were nervous, whispering their lines or humming songs under their breath. Others were full of confidence, already imagining the applause they would receive. Near the side of the stage stood an old upright piano. Its surface was slightly worn, the wood faded in some places from years of use. Most students barely noticed it. They were too busy talking about dance routines, comedy acts, and magic tricks. But one boy noticed it. He had noticed it the moment he walked into the room. He was quiet, the kind of student who didn't try to stand out. He usually sat in the second or third row in class, listening carefully but rarely raising his hand. Some people thought he was shy. Others thought he just didn't have much to say. The truth was, he simply preferred listening over speaking. That afternoon he stood near the back wall, watching the stage. His name was written on the performance list, but not many people had paid attention to it. When they saw a piano solo next to his name, a few students had shrugged. Piano wasn't considered exciting compared to loud music or energetic dance moves. A group of boys stood a few steps away from him. They were known for joking around and making others laugh. They weren't mean in a serious way, but they liked attention. One of them noticed the quiet boy staring at the piano. "So you're playing today?" he asked loudly, making sure others could hear. The quiet boy nodded. "What are you going to play? Twinkle, twinkle?" Another one joked, and the group burst into laughter. The quiet boy smiled softly. He had heard jokes like this before. He didn't react with anger or embarrassment. Instead, he simply said, "You'll see." One of the boys stepped closer, pretending to be serious. "Hey, I'm just saying, don't fall asleep up there. People might think it's background music." More laughter followed. A few nearby students turned to look. Some smiled awkwardly. Others seemed curious. The teasing wasn't cruel, but it was loud enough to draw attention. The quiet boy felt his face grow slightly warm, but he kept his expression calm. Inside, his heart was beating faster. Not because of the teasing, but because he was thinking about the music he was about to play. He had practiced for weeks. Every evening after school, while others were outside playing or scrolling through their phones, he sat at a small keyboard in his room. It wasn't a fancy instrument. A few keys were slightly softer than the others, but he didn't mind. He had learned to adjust. He had learned to listen carefully. Music had always been his way of speaking. When he felt happy, he played. When he felt confused, he played. When he felt proud or disappointed, he played. The piano didn't interrupt him. It didn't laugh at him. It didn't ask him to explain himself. It simply responded to his touch. Back in the auditorium, the teacher in charge clapped her hands to get everyone's attention. "Okay, everyone, please take your seats. We're starting in 5 minutes." Students began moving toward the rows of chairs. The group of boys finally walked away, still chuckling to themselves. One of them glanced back and said, "Good luck. Don't mess up." The quiet boy nodded again. As he walked toward the stage area, he could feel the nerves slowly building. His hands felt slightly cold. He rubbed them together gently. He wasn't afraid of making mistakes. He was afraid of not being understood. The first few performances began. A dance group went up and performed an energetic routine. The audience clapped loudly. Then someone told a series of jokes. The room filled with laughter. After that, a girl sang a popular song and many students joined in. The quiet boy watched carefully from the side. He clapped for each performer. He noticed how the audience reacted to loud sounds, bright smiles, and big movements. Piano was different. It wasn't loud in the same way. It didn't jump around the stage. He wondered, just for a second, if maybe the teasing boys were right. Maybe no one would really listen. But then he remembered something his grandfather once told him. If you play with honesty, people will feel it. Even if they don't understand music, they understand feelings. That thought stayed with him. Finally, his name was called. There was a small pause. A few students whispered, trying to remember who he was. When he walked onto the stage, The lights felt brighter than he expected. He blinked once, adjusting his eyes. He could see rows of faces. Some looked interested. Some looked bored. A few of the teasing boys were sitting together, watching closely, small smiles on their faces. He took a slow breath and walked toward the piano. The bench felt slightly hard as he sat down. He adjusted his position, making sure he was comfortable. He placed his hands gently on his lap for a moment. The room wasn't completely silent. There were still small whispers, a cough from the back, the sound of someone shifting in their seat. He closed his eyes for a brief second. In that moment, he wasn't in the auditorium anymore. He was back in his small room at home. The evening light coming through the window, the quiet hum of the fan, the familiar feeling of keys under his fingers. He lifted his hands and placed them on the piano. From the audience, someone whispered, "Let's see what he's got." One of the teasing boys leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms as if preparing to judge. The quiet boy pressed down on the first key. A single note filled the room. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it was clear, steady. Some of the whispering stopped. He played a second note, then a third. Slowly, carefully, building something soft and gentle. The melody began to form like a story being told one sentence at a time. He wasn't rushing. He let the music breathe. At first, a few students still shifted in their seats. But as the notes connected and grew, something began to change. The simple tune became deeper, warmer, carried emotion without words. The teasing boys weren't laughing anymore. One of them leaned forward slightly. The quiet boy's fingers moved with confidence now. The nervousness in his chest slowly faded. This was familiar ground. This was where he felt strongest. The melody rose higher, then dipped low, like waves moving across water. It wasn't a song anyone recognized from the radio. It was something he had shaped himself. Something personal. A teacher near the front folded her hands and listened closely. The auditorium grew still. Even the air felt different. The quiet boy didn't notice the silence at first. He was focused on the rhythm, on the timing, on the feeling behind each note. But somewhere in the middle of the piece he sensed it. No whispers, no laughter, no movement, just listening. And for the first time that afternoon, he felt completely understood. He wasn't the quiet kid standing in the back anymore. He was the one telling the story, and everyone was finally hearing it. The moment his fingers touched the keys, the quiet boy felt a strange calm wash over him. The auditorium seemed to shrink around him, and all the noise of the students and teachers faded into the background. He was no longer standing on a stage in front of an audience. He was simply in the music, letting it flow from his hands and into the room. At first, the melody was soft, almost like a whisper. It started slowly, with gentle notes that floated through the air. The audience, at first unsure what they were hearing, began to lean in. The teasing boys, who had moments ago been whispering and smirking, paused. Their eyes widened slightly, and for the first time they were truly watching. The boy didn't rush. Each note had its own space. He felt the music in his chest, letting it guide his fingers. There was a rhythm that came naturally, a kind of heartbeat that matched his own. As he played, he remembered all the nights he had spent practicing alone. The tiny keyboard at home, the music sheets scattered across the floor, the quiet hum of the evening air. All of it came together in this moment. Some students shifted in their seats, unsure what to make of this unusual performance. There were no flashy moves, no dramatic gestures, just the music. But slowly, the sound began to fill the room in a way that no one expected. It wasn't just noise. It wasn't background music. It was alive. A teacher in the front row leaned forward. She had heard students play before, many of them talented. But there was something different about this. The boy wasn't just pressing keys. He was telling a story. The notes rose and fell, soft and strong, playful and somber, all at once. It was impossible to look away, even if someone tried. In the back, a few students who had been chatting fell silent. They watched as his hands moved effortlessly across the piano. There was focus, precision, and a kind of freedom all in the same motion. The music was not just sound, it was feeling. Each note seemed to carry a memory, a thought, a little piece of his heart. The moment his fingers touched the keys, the quiet boy felt a strange calm wash over him. The auditorium seemed to shrink around him, and all the noise of the students and teachers faded into the background. He was no longer standing on a stage in front of an audience. He was simply in the music, letting it flow from his hands and into the room. At first, the melody was soft, almost like a whisper. It started slowly, with gentle notes that floated through the air. The audience, at first unsure what they were hearing, began to lean in. The teasing boys, who had moments ago been whispering and smirking, paused. Their eyes widened slightly, and for the first time they were truly watching. The boy didn't rush. Each note had its own space. He felt the music in his chest, letting it guide his fingers. There was a rhythm that came naturally, a kind of heartbeat that matched his own. As he played, he remembered all the nights he had spent practicing alone. The tiny keyboard at home, the music sheets scattered across the floor, the quiet hum of the evening air. All of it came together in this moment. Some students shifted in their seats, unsure what to make of this unusual performance. There were no flashy moves, no dramatic gestures, just the music. But slowly, the sound began to fill the room in a way that no one expected. It wasn't just noise. It wasn't background music. It was alive. A teacher in the front row leaned forward. She had heard students play before, many of them talented, but there was something different about this. The boy wasn't just pressing keys. He was telling a story. The notes rose and fell, soft and strong, playful and somber, all at once. It was impossible to look away, even if someone tried. In the back, a few students who had been chatting fell silent. They watched as his hands moved effortlessly across the piano. There was focus, precision, and a kind of freedom all in the same motion. The music was not just sound, it was feeling. Each note seemed to carry a memory, a thought, a little piece of his heart. The teasing boys had stopped their whispers completely. One of them leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. He couldn't look away. The quiet boy was no longer just the shy student in the corner. He was commanding attention without a single word. The melody began to grow richer. The boy's fingers moved faster, yet perfectly controlled. The notes intertwined like threads in a tapestry, creating a pattern that seemed both complex and natural. Some students gasped softly, their eyes wide with surprise. They hadn't expected this. A girl near the front covered her mouth with her hands. She felt something stir inside her, an emotion that she couldn't name but that the music made her feel deeply. Others around her shifted in their seats, drawn in by the beauty of what was unfolding. The boy played with expression, letting his feelings guide him. Happiness, sadness, excitement, calm. All of it mixed into the music. He wasn't just performing. He was living each moment, sharing a piece of himself with everyone in the room. The older boys who had teased him earlier were now leaning forward, their previous smirks gone. They exchanged looks of disbelief. They had thought this would be simple, maybe even boring, but what they were hearing was extraordinary. The boy had taken their joke and turned it into something powerful. Time seemed to stretch. The first few notes had been enough to capture the audience, but now the music carried them away. Some students closed their eyes, letting the sound wash over them. Others watched the boy's hands, mesmerized by the speed and accuracy with which he moved. Every note mattered. There was a clarity to his playing that made each sound distinct, yet it all blended into a harmonious story. The boy felt the energy of the room shift. What had started as whispers and laughter transformed into complete attention, silent and respectful. The boy remembered a moment from practice when he had struggled with a particular part of the melody. He had been frustrated, unsure if he could ever play it smoothly. But he had kept going, day after day, learning to feel the music rather than just memorize it. Now, that hard work shone in every key he touched. The audience could feel it too. The story of his dedication, his patience, and his love for music came through without him saying a word. Some teachers exchanged glances, impressed at the natural talent and emotion in the performance. Others simply sat back, letting the music speak for itself. The melody began to change subtly. He introduced small variations, gentle twists in rhythm and tone. The quiet boy was taking risks, exploring the piano in ways that were unexpected but perfect. The audience held their breath as the music grew more intense, more intricate. Students who had been distracted moments ago were now fully focused. They leaned forward, moved closer in their seats, and even a few whispered to each other, trying to understand what they were experiencing. But words were not enough. This was something to be felt, not explained. The teasing boys, now completely silent, couldn't hide their astonishment. One of them slowly shook his head, as if to tell himself he had been wrong to doubt the boy. He had teased him without realizing the depth of his talent. The boy continued to play, unaware of the effect he had on the room. He didn't need to notice the reactions or applause. He was fully immersed in the music. Each note was chosen carefully, each pause intentional, each movement deliberate. He had learned to let the music guide him, and now it was guiding everyone else in the room too. As the melody reached its peak, the boy's fingers moved faster, yet never lost control. The complexity of the music was breathtaking. The sound filled every corner of the auditorium, touching every listener. Students held their breath, teachers leaned forward, and even the janitor standing near the back paused to listen. It was a transformation. The boy had taken the room from a noisy, casual gathering into a space of quiet wonder. The music created its own atmosphere, one that could not be broken by words or distractions. Everyone was connected, listening together, feeling the story unfold through the piano. Slowly, the music began to soften. The notes became smaller, gentler, like waves fading on a shore. The audience felt a sense of calm after the storm of sound. They were left hanging on each note, waiting for the final moment. The boy took a final breath, held it for a heartbeat, and played the last note. It lingered in the air, clear and beautiful. For a moment, there was complete silence. No one moved. No one spoke. Everyone was stunned by what they had just witnessed. Then, as if released from a spell, the room erupted into applause. Students stood, clapping and cheering, some shouting words of amazement. Teachers smiled broadly, some wiping tears from their eyes. The boy had done more than perform a song. He had touched the hearts of everyone present. The teasing boys looked at each other, humbled and amazed. They had thought they were teasing a quiet student, just having fun. But what they had seen was something extraordinary. The quiet boy had transformed their joke into an unforgettable experience. He bowed slightly, acknowledging the applause, but his eyes were calm and focused. He knew the music had spoken louder than any words ever could. He stepped away from the piano, feeling a quiet pride, knowing he had shared something real, something personal, and everyone had felt it too. As he walked off the stage, some students followed him with smiles, whispering congratulations. Teachers nodded with respect. The older boys, once teasing, now approached with a quiet admiration, unsure what to say but eager to acknowledge the talent they had underestimated. That day, the quiet boy's music had done more than fill the auditorium. It had changed the way people saw him. He wasn't just the shy, quiet student anymore. He was the boy who had silenced a room, the boy who had spoken through the piano, and the boy whose talent left everyone amazed. And as the audience slowly returned to normal, buzzing with excitement and conversation, one thing was certain. No one would forget the sound of that first melody, the calm, the power, and the quiet strength that had come from a boy who had once been underestimated. The quiet boy felt a strange mixture of calm and excitement as he continued playing. Each note seemed to have its own voice, rising and falling with a rhythm that felt natural and true. He closed his eyes, letting his fingers move freely across the keys, trusting the music to guide him. With every press, every release, the melody grew more alive, filling the auditorium in a way that no one could ignore. The audience had become completely still. The previous chatter, the coughs, and the restless shifting in chairs had vanished. Students leaned forward, eyes wide, captivated by the boy's performance. Teachers watched in awe, some whispering quietly to each other, unable to hide their astonishment. The music was no longer just sound. It had become an experience. The boy's melody shifted subtly, changing tempo and tone. He introduced a soft, flowing sequence of notes, gentle and delicate, like sunlight streaming through a window. Some students closed their eyes, feeling the music inside themselves, letting it move through their emotions. Others followed his hands, watching every movement, noticing how precise yet effortless it all looked. Even the group of boys who had teased him earlier were silent. Their smirks had disappeared, replaced by focused attention. They exchanged glances, silently acknowledging that they had underestimated him. One of them leaned forward slightly, resting his chin in his hand, unable to look away. He had expected a simple, unremarkable performance, but what he was witnessing was far beyond anything he had imagined. The boy felt the connection with the audience growing stronger. Each note seemed to reach out, touching someone in the room in a different way. A teacher in the front row held her breath, feeling a shiver run down her spine. A student near the back had tears in their eyes, overcome by the emotion carried through the music. Even those who had been skeptical were now fully absorbed, completely silent, and completely present. The melody began to grow richer and more complex. The boy's fingers danced across the keys, striking both high and low notes, weaving together harmonies that felt natural yet sophisticated. The sound filled the auditorium from corner to corner, wrapping around every listener. Some students whispered to each other, amazed, but even their quiet voices couldn't disturb the spell that had been created. The boy played with expression, letting his emotions flow freely. Joy, sadness, excitement, longing. They all found their way into the music. It was as if the piano had become an extension of his soul, translating thoughts and feelings into a language everyone could understand. The audience could feel it, even without understanding the technical details of the music. The older boys who had teased him earlier were now leaning in, their earlier confidence replaced by awe. They had learned a powerful lesson in humility. They realized that this quiet, unassuming boy held something extraordinary inside him, something they could neither mock nor ignore. The boy's melody shifted again, introducing a series of quick, playful notes that seemed to dance across the keys. The sound brought a smile to the audience's faces, a brief moment of lightness amid the deeper emotions of the piece. Some students laughed softly, surprised at how the music could carry both seriousness and playfulness at the same time. The music became more intense as the boy approached the middle of the piece. He played faster, but each note remained clear and deliberate. The audience could feel the energy building, a wave of emotion rising with every chord. Hearts pounded in rhythm with the music. The auditorium, once noisy and distracted, had transformed into a space of shared experience. The boy's hands moved effortlessly, guided by instinct and practice. Each gesture, each movement, was purposeful yet fluid. He was not thinking about how it looked or how it would be received. He was simply letting the music flow. That authenticity made the performance even more powerful. Some students were holding their breath, unable to believe what they were hearing. They had never experienced anything like this before. It was not just a piano performance. It was a story told without words, a journey shared through sound. Every listener felt something different, but everyone felt something. The boy's melody then softened again, creating a quiet, introspective section. The notes were delicate, almost fragile, like tiny ripples across still water. The audience leaned in closer, listening intently. Some closed their eyes, letting the sound fill them, imagining places and memories that the music brought to mind. The boy thought of the hours he had spent practicing alone at home, the late nights when he played until his fingers ached, the determination to perfect every note. Every struggle, every small victory in practice was now part of this moment. The music carried it all and the audience could feel it. As the melody continued, the boy introduced subtle changes, experimenting with timing and emphasis. Each variation added depth to the story he was telling. He felt the audience respond without them saying a word. Their silence, their focus, their emotions. It all guided him. He was playing not for applause or recognition, but for the shared experience he created with them. The older boys were now completely captivated. They had expected a short, ordinary performance, but now they were witnessing something unforgettable. One of them shifted in his seat, whispering to another, "I never thought he could do this." The other simply nodded, unable to find words. They had underestimated him, and the realization was humbling. The music began to swell, building to a crescendo. The boys' fingers moved with energy and precision, striking chords that resonated throughout the auditorium. Students felt the sound vibrate in their chests. Teachers closed their eyes to focus, and even some of the younger children in the audience sat completely still, mesmerized. The crescendo reached its peak, a series of strong, bold notes that carried the full emotion of the piece. The boy's heart raced with excitement, not from fear, but from the intensity of the music. He felt alive in a way he had never felt before on stage. The audience was completely with him, sharing the moment, holding their breath, feeling the power of the performance. Then, gradually, the music began to descend, slowing and softening. The notes became gentle again, like a whisper after a storm. The audience exhaled together, sensing the end approaching. The boy played the final few notes with care, letting each one linger just long enough to leave its mark. The last note hung in the air, clear and resonant. For a moment there was silence. No one moved. No one spoke. Everyone felt the impact of what they had just experienced. It was more than a song. It was a story, a journey, a shared emotion that connected every person in the room. Then, slowly, the audience erupted into applause. Students clapped and cheered, some standing, some wiping tears from their eyes. Teachers smiled broadly, impressed and moved. Even the boys who had teased him earlier joined in, their previous arrogance replaced by genuine admiration. They had been proven wrong in the most undeniable way. The boy stood quietly, letting the applause wash over him. He didn't need to say anything. The music had spoken for him. It had told his story, expressed his emotions, and captured the hearts of everyone in the room. As he stepped away from the piano, the audience continued to clap. Students approached him with smiles, offering words of praise. Teachers nodded in respect. Even the teasing boys, once loud and mocking, now looked at him with newfound respect. That day, the quiet boy had not only played the piano, he had shared a part of himself. He had shown that talent and dedication could speak louder than words, that quiet strength could captivate and move a room, and that anyone underestimated could rise to inspire. The memory of that performance would stay with the audience for a long time. They had witnessed something rare and extraordinary. A story told through music, a boy's heart expressed in every note, and a quiet student transforming the ordinary into the unforgettable. As the auditorium slowly emptied, whispers of admiration and amazement followed him. Students talked about the melody, the skill, the emotion. Teachers remarked on the dedication and passion. Even the teasing boys walked away, humbled, having learned a lesson they wouldn't forget. Never judge someone by their quiet demeanor, for within it could lie greatness waiting to be revealed. The boy, meanwhile, left the stage with a quiet smile. He didn't need the praise or attention. What mattered was that he had shared something real, something meaningful. And as the audience continued to discuss and remember the performance, he knew that the music had done exactly what it was meant to do. It had touched hearts and left an unforgettable mark. The quiet boy's hands moved over the piano keys with a confidence that had grown from countless hours of practice. The music was no longer just something he played, it had become a part of him. Each note carried emotion, telling a story that words could never fully capture. The audience, once filled with laughter and whispers, now sat in awe, completely immersed in what they were hearing. The melody shifted, moving from soft, gentle notes to a richer, more powerful sequence. It rose and fell like waves, each chord adding depth and feeling. The students leaned forward, captivated by the changes, their eyes wide, their breaths held. Some teachers had their hands clasped together, feeling the music in a way that made them almost forget they were in a school auditorium. The boy was completely absorbed. He didn't notice the audience staring at him, the curious glances, or the disbelief on the faces of the boys who had teased him earlier. All that mattered was the connection between him and the music. He could feel the story unfolding in his hands and in his heart. As the melody continued, the audience began to respond in subtle ways. Some students closed their eyes, letting the sound fill them. They could imagine places and memories, feelings they had never thought to explore. Others followed his fingers, amazed at the speed and precision with which he played. The combination of technical skill and emotional depth was unlike anything they had seen before. The teasing boys, who had thought this would be easy to mock, were now leaning forward in their seats. Their previous confidence had vanished, replaced by admiration and a growing sense of humility. One whispered to another, "I didn't expect this at all." The other simply nodded, unable to speak. They realized that they had misjudged someone so quiet and unassuming. The boy's hands moved faster now, but the music remained controlled and deliberate. He was exploring the piano, experimenting with rhythm and melody while still maintaining a sense of harmony. The audience could sense the creativity, the spontaneity, and the careful thought behind each note. Every sound carried meaning. Some students were visibly moved. A few had tears in their eyes, overwhelmed by the beauty and emotion of the performance. Others whispered to each other, sharing their amazement. The boys' music had reached them in ways that words could not, touching something deep inside each listener. The melody shifted again, this time introducing a series of faster, lighter notes that seemed to dance across the keys. It brought a sense of playfulness and joy, surprising the audience after the intensity of the previous section. Some students smiled, some laughed softly, and others were simply amazed at the range of emotions the boy could express through the piano. The music then grew more dramatic, building toward a powerful crescendo. The boy's fingers moved with energy, striking chords that vibrated through the auditorium. Students felt the sound in their chests, teachers leaned forward to catch every note, and even the younger children in the audience were mesmerized. The performance had become more than a solo. It was a shared experience, a journey that everyone in the room was taking together. The boy played with a combination of control and freedom. He had learned to let the music guide him, trusting his instincts and his practice. Each note, each pause, each chord progression was intentional, yet it felt effortless. That authenticity made the performance even more compelling, drawing the audience further into the story he was telling through sound. The audience began to feel the energy shift as the boy reached the climax of his piece. The music swelled, rising to a height that seemed to fill every corner of the auditorium. Students held their breath, teachers leaned forward, and even those who had been skeptical at the start were completely captivated. The quiet boy, once overlooked and underestimated, now commanded the room without a single word. He had learned to express himself through the piano in a way that transcended normal performance. Every note was deliberate, every pause meaningful. The audience felt the care and thought behind each sound, sensing the emotions he poured into the music. Some students even closed their eyes, letting the waves of sound move through them, feeling joy, sadness, excitement, and calm all at once. The melody softened briefly, giving the audience a moment to catch their breath. Then the boy introduced subtle variations, experimenting with dynamics and timing. The music became more intricate, layered with emotion and technical skill. The audience could feel the complexity, yet it remained beautiful and accessible. Every listener was engaged, fully present, and completely captivated. The teasing boys were no longer whispering. Their previous confidence had been replaced by awe and respect. They had thought they were making a joke, but now they were witnessing something extraordinary. One of them muttered, "I never thought he could play like this," and the other nodded silently. They had learned a lesson about judging others too quickly, about underestimating someone who appeared quiet or reserved. The boy continued, letting the music rise and fall naturally. He explored new harmonies, creating tension and release that held the audience's attention completely. The melody was alive, almost breathing, and everyone in the auditorium could feel it. Some students were sitting completely still, while others leaned forward, drawn in by the sound. Teachers whispered to each other, amazed at the talent before them. They had seen many students perform over the years, but there was something unique about this boy. It wasn't just skill. It was passion, dedication, and a deep understanding of music that made every note feel meaningful. The boy's performance was not about showing off. It was about expression, about sharing a part of himself through sound. He had learned over countless hours of practice that music could communicate what words could not. And now, in front of a room full of people, he was doing exactly that. The audience began to feel a range of emotions. Some were inspired, imagining what they could achieve if they pursued their own passions. Others were moved, reflecting on memories and feelings stirred by the music. Even those who were not usually interested in piano or classical music found themselves captivated. The boy's performance had broken through barriers, reaching people who had never expected to be touched in this way. The music began to slow, transitioning into a gentle, reflective section. The notes became soft and delicate, like ripples on a calm lake. The audience leaned in, listening intently. Some students closed their eyes, letting the sound carry them to places they had never imagined. Others followed the boy's hands closely, marveling at the skill and emotion in every movement. The boy remembered the times he had struggled with certain pieces at home, the hours of repetition, the patience required to perfect each note. All of that effort had led to this moment. Every challenge he had faced in practice had contributed to the depth and authenticity of his performance. As he continued, the music became increasingly expressive. Each note conveyed thought and feeling. Each pause allowed the audience to absorb the emotion. The boy felt the energy in the room, the shared connection between him and everyone listening. It was a silent conversation, one carried entirely by sound. The audience responded, not with words, but with focus, attention, and emotion. They could sense the dedication behind every chord, the care in every sequence, the honesty in every melody. The boy's music had created a space where everyone could feel and reflect, a space that transcended the ordinary. The crescendo approached again, rising slowly, building anticipation. The boy's fingers moved with purpose, striking chords that resonated in the room. The audience felt the energy, the intensity, the power of the music. Hearts beat faster, breaths were held, and eyes followed each movement of his hands. Finally, the music softened, slowing down to a gentle conclusion. The boy played the last few notes with care, letting each sound linger before fading away. The audience sat in stunned silence, feeling the impact of what they had just experienced. Then, as if released from a spell, the auditorium erupted into applause. Students clapped and cheered, some standing, some smiling with tears in their eyes. Teachers nodded in admiration, impressed and moved. The teasing boys joined in, their previous arrogance replaced by genuine respect. They had witnessed something extraordinary, something they would never forget. The boy stood quietly, letting the applause wash over him. He did not need to speak or explain himself. The music had done that for him. It had told his story, expressed his feelings, and captured the hearts of everyone present. As he stepped away from the piano, students approached him, offering congratulations and smiles. Teachers nodded, acknowledging his talent and dedication. Even the boys who had teased him earlier walked away, humbled and reflective. They had learned an important lesson. Never underestimate someone because they are quiet, because they do not boast, or because they do not draw attention to themselves. The boy's performance had changed more than the mood in the auditorium. It had changed perceptions. It had shown that dedication, passion, and honesty could speak louder than any words. And as the audience left the room, whispering about the incredible performance, one thing was certain. The quiet boy's music had left an unforgettable impression, one that would be remembered for a long time. The memory of the performance lingered in the minds of everyone present. Students talked about the melody, the skill, and the emotion. Teachers reflected on the dedication required to achieve such mastery. And even the teasing boys, who had once doubted him, had learned to appreciate the power of talent combined with humility. The quiet boy, meanwhile, walked away from the stage with a sense of calm satisfaction. He did not seek attention or praise. What mattered most was that he had shared something real, something meaningful, and something that touched the hearts of everyone in the room. And as the applause faded, he knew that his music had done exactly what it was meant to do: connect, inspire, and leave a lasting impression on everyone who had listened. The quiet boy felt a sense of calm as the final notes lingered in the air. The audience had been silent for a moment, letting the sound fade, letting the emotion settle in their hearts. Then, slowly, the room erupted into applause. It started softly, with a few claps here and there, then grew louder as more students and teachers realized what they had just witnessed. Hands clapped, feet stomped, and some students even cheered, unable to contain their excitement. The boy sat for a moment, letting the energy of the room reach him. He had never experienced anything like this. All the teasing, the doubts, the quiet moments of practice alone, it had led to this. Every effort he had made, every late night and every mistake he had corrected, had become part of this moment. The music had spoken louder than words ever could. The group of boys who had teased him earlier sat quietly, looking at him with a mix of surprise and admiration. They had expected a simple, unremarkable performance, maybe even a reason to laugh, but they had been proven completely wrong. One of them whispered to another, "I didn't think he could do that." The other nodded silently, their previous confidence replaced with a quiet respect. Some students approached him with wide smiles, complimenting him softly. "That was amazing," one whispered. "I didn't know you could play like that," said another. The boy smiled politely, not needing to say much. The applause and the admiration were enough. He had done what he had set out to do: share his music and his feelings with everyone in the room. Teachers, too, were impressed. They had seen many students perform over the years, but something about this boy was different. It wasn't just his technical skill or the beauty of the melody. It was the honesty, the emotion, and the way he had captured everyone's attention without even speaking. One teacher leaned toward another and said softly, "He has something special." That was extraordinary. The boy stood slowly, bowing slightly to acknowledge the applause. He could feel the warmth of the moment, the shared connection with the audience. He didn't need to boast or speak. The music had told the story, and now the applause confirmed that everyone had understood. Even the boys who had teased him earlier now approached him, offering a quiet nod of respect. They had learned an important lesson. You could not judge someone by appearances, by quietness, or by a lack of attention-seeking behavior. Sometimes, the people who seemed the least noticeable were the ones capable of the most extraordinary things. The audience continued to clap, some still standing, some wiping tears from their eyes. The boy had played with heart and soul, and it showed. The music had moved them, connected them, and left them thinking about more than just notes and rhythms. It had left an impression that would stay with them for a long time. He walked toward the edge of the stage, feeling the applause surround him. Some students whispered excitedly to each other, replaying the performance in their minds. They talked about the way the notes had flowed, the emotions carried in the melody, and the calm yet powerful presence of the boy at the piano. The boy thought briefly about his time practicing alone at home, the small keyboard in his room, the hours spent perfecting each sequence, the moments of frustration and triumph. It had all been worth it. He realized that the dedication he had shown in private had prepared him for this public moment, for the recognition he had earned without asking for it. He walked down the steps from the stage, feeling the weight of the experience settle in. It wasn't about fame or recognition. It wasn't about proving the teasing boys wrong. It was about expressing himself, connecting with others, and showing that talent and passion could communicate in ways that words could not. The boy's performance had created a ripple effect. Students who had been distracted or disinterested were now thinking about music differently. Teachers who had been skeptical were reconsidering their assumptions. Even the teasing boys were reflecting on their actions and learning to respect the quiet strength that could exist in someone overlooked. A few students approached him, asking questions about how he had learned to play so well. He answered politely, explaining that it had taken a lot of practice, patience, and love for music. He emphasized that it wasn't about being the best or impressing others, but about sharing what he felt and letting the music speak. As the audience began to leave, many continued to talk about the performance. They replayed the melody in their minds, recalling the emotions it had stirred. The boy had not just performed. He had created a moment, a shared experience that brought people together and left them feeling inspired. The teachers gathered quietly, discussing what they had seen. They marveled at the talent and dedication of the boy. Some suggested that he should pursue music more seriously, perhaps joining a music program or performing in other events. They recognized the rare combination of skill, emotion, and authenticity that made his performance unforgettable. The boy didn't rush to leave. He lingered for a moment, observing the audience's reactions, feeling the connection that had been created. It was a different kind of success, one that wasn't measured by trophies or certificates, but by the way he had moved people through his music. Even the teasing boys walked past him, now quietly impressed. They didn't need to say much. Their expressions, the slight nods, and the absence of their previous mockery were enough. They had learned a valuable lesson about humility and respect, realizing that talent often comes from places they least expect. The boy finally stepped out of the auditorium, taking a deep breath of fresh air. The day had been overwhelming, but in the best possible way. He had shared something deeply personal, something that required courage, focus, and honesty. And now, he could feel the satisfaction of having done so successfully. He walked home slowly, replaying the performance in his mind. The notes, the emotions, the reactions of the audience, all of it flowed through him. He felt proud, not because of praise or recognition, but because he had given his best, shared his passion, and connected with others in a meaningful way. That night, the boy reflected on what had happened. He realized that music was more than just notes on a page. It was communication, expression, and connection. It had the power to reach people in ways that words could not, to touch hearts, and to inspire change. The boy understood that his journey was only beginning. The performance had opened doors, shown him the possibilities, and given him confidence. He knew he would continue to practice, to explore new melodies, and to share his music whenever he could. For the students and teachers who had watched him that day, the memory would stay. They would remember the quiet boy at the piano, the melody that rose and fell, and the way he had silenced the room not with words, but with music. They would remember the lesson, that talent and dedication, combined with passion and honesty, could create moments of awe and inspiration. And as the boy closed the door to his home that evening, he felt a quiet sense of fulfillment. He had expressed himself fully, shared his gift, and left a mark on everyone who had listened. It was a reminder that sometimes, the quietest voices, the ones who seem unnoticed, have the most powerful stories to tell. And all it takes is the courage to let them be heard. The quiet boy walked out of the auditorium with a sense of calm pride. The applause and cheers still echoed in his mind, and he could see the smiles on the faces of students and teachers alike. What had started as a moment of teasing and doubt had transformed into something unforgettable. The performance was over, but its impact would last much longer. As he walked down the hallway, students stopped to congratulate him. Some shook his hand, others gave him high fives, and a few simply nodded with admiration. Even those who had never spoken to him before seemed drawn to acknowledge his talent. The boy smiled quietly, not seeking attention, but appreciating the recognition that came naturally from his effort and skill. The teasing boys approached, still a little unsure of how to react. They had laughed at him earlier, thinking the piano solo would be simple or uninteresting. Now, standing face to face with someone whose talent they had underestimated, they felt humbled. One of them said quietly, That was amazing. I didn't know you could play like that." The boy simply nodded, accepting their words without pride or arrogance. Teachers gathered around him, expressing their surprise and admiration. They discussed how rare it was to see a performance that combined technical skill, emotion, and presence in such a seamless way. One teacher said, "You have a gift, and the way you shared it today moved everyone. You should keep pursuing it." The boy felt a warm satisfaction but remained grounded, understanding that this was just one step on a long journey. News of the performance spread quickly throughout the school. Students who had not attended the talent show came by to hear about it. They spoke about the way the boy had silenced the room, about the emotions his music carried, and about how unexpectedly powerful his performance had been. Even those who did not usually pay attention to piano or music were impressed. At home later that day, the boy reflected on everything that had happened. He thought about the hours of practice he had invested, the patience required to perfect each note, and the countless times he had played alone, unsure if anyone would ever hear him. All that effort had come together in a single moment, transforming the way people saw him and the way he saw himself. He realized that talent alone was not enough. It was the dedication, the willingness to keep practicing, and the courage to perform in front of others that had made the difference. The music had been his voice, and it had spoken louder than any words could. He felt proud, not because of recognition, but because he had shared something personal and meaningful. The impact of his performance extended beyond that single day. Students began to see him differently. Teachers took notice of his potential and encouraged him to explore opportunities for music outside of school. Even the teasing boys learned an important lesson about humility and respect. They understood that sometimes the quietest people possess the most extraordinary abilities, and that underestimating someone can lead to surprising lessons. The boy's family, when they heard about what had happened, felt a mix of pride and joy. They had always known he loved music and had practiced diligently, but seeing him recognized by a wider audience confirmed the talent and passion they had long supported. The boy felt a quiet happiness, knowing that his family shared in the moment without needing him to boast. As days passed, the boy continued to practice. The performance had given him confidence, but it had also shown him that there was always room to grow. He explored new melodies, experimented with rhythms, and challenged himself to reach higher levels of skill and expression. The applause from the auditorium stayed with him, reminding him of the power of dedication and authenticity. In school, students now approached him differently. They asked about his music, complimented his skills, and even sought advice on how to practice or improve. The boy shared his knowledge humbly, emphasizing patience, focus, and the importance of enjoying the process. He encouraged others to pursue their passions, showing that hard work and love for what you do can produce remarkable results. The boy also reflected on the emotional connection he had created with the audience. Music was more than sound, it was a way to communicate, to connect, and to inspire. He realized that his goal was not just to play beautifully, but to share emotion, to move people, and to leave an impact. That insight motivated him to continue learning, growing, and performing whenever he could. Opportunities began to present themselves. Teachers suggested recitals, local music programs reached out, and other students expressed interest in joining him for small performances. The boy embraced these opportunities with focus and dedication. He understood that recognition was a result of effort, not something to chase, and he approached each chance with humility and purpose. The teasing boys, once doubtful and mocking, now became quiet admirers of his skill. They realized that talent is not about showiness or loudness, but about discipline, passion, and heart. Their respect was genuine, and their earlier teasing faded into a lesson they would remember. The boy's journey also inspired other students to take their own interests more seriously. They saw firsthand how dedication and practice could lead to unexpected results. Some began to explore their hidden talents, while others simply gained a deeper appreciation for the effort behind skill. The boy's performance had become more than a single moment. It had become an example of what perseverance and passion could achieve. Even months later, people in the school would still talk about the performance. The story of the quiet boy who had silenced an entire auditorium with his piano spread beyond those who had been present. It became an inspiring tale, reminding everyone that true talent often hides in the most unexpected places, and that opportunity and courage can reveal greatness in anyone. The boy himself never forgot the experience. He carried it with him as a source of motivation and confidence. Each time he sat at a piano, he remembered the look on the faces of the students and teachers, the hush of the auditorium, and the applause that followed. It reminded him why he loved music, why he practiced tirelessly, and why sharing his passion mattered more than anything else. He continued to explore music deeply, always seeking new ways to express himself and connect with others. Every melody became a story, every chord a message, and every performance an opportunity to inspire and touch hearts. He understood that music had the power to change perceptions, to create connection, and to leave a lasting impression. Years later, the memory of that performance remained vivid. Students who had watched him play would recall the silence that fell over the auditorium, the emotion carried in every note, and the quiet confidence of a boy who had dared to share his gift. Teachers remembered the power of authenticity and dedication. Even the teasing boys remembered the lesson they had learned about respect and humility. The quiet boy had transformed not only his own path but the people around him. He had shown that talent, when paired with dedication, patience, and authenticity, could inspire, move, and change the way others see the world. And he had done it not for recognition, not for praise, but simply because he loved what he did and wanted to share it. His story became a quiet legend within the school. It was a reminder to every student that greatness can come from anywhere, that the shyest, most reserved person might hold extraordinary talent, and that perseverance and passion can overcome doubt and mockery. And as he continued his journey with music, the boy understood one important truth. Success is not measured by applause alone. Success is measured by the hearts touched, the connections made, and the courage to express yourself fully. That day, with one performance, he had achieved all of those things, and in doing so had left an unforgettable mark on everyone who had listened. The boy smiled quietly to himself as he practiced later that evening. He didn't need the applause to feel proud. He had experienced something far more valuable. The realization that his voice, through music, could reach others, inspire them, and leave a lasting impression. He knew that this was only the beginning of his journey, but it was a beginning filled with promise, purpose, and the quiet power of his talent finally recognized.